Hi, this is the Business Guy. Today, we're diving into a remarkable story of transformation and redemption from the dark corners of the criminal underworld to becoming a beacon of hope and change. Once a major player in the drug trade, his life took an unexpected turn, leading him through the harrowing corridors of the prison system to a path of rehabilitation and service. He's since worked through the very agency.
Police department, search warrant! Open the door!
That once pursued him, the DEA, and has become an outspoken advocate against the very crimes he once committed. With the release of his candid memoir, the book called One Step Over the Line, he's here to discuss the gritty details of the past, the pivotal moments of his transformation, as well as the insights he gained from a life that seen both the highest highs and the lowest lows. This tale of loss, love, and the relentless pursuit of a second chance. So join us as we explore the depths of human resilience with a man who's crossed the line only to erase it and draw a new one for himself and others. Welcome to an intimate conversation that promises to be as enlightening as it is inspiring. So I'd like to introduce to you Ken Behr. Ken, tell us about your book. And first of all, tell us the official title of the book.
Okay, so the title is One Step Over the Line, Confessions of a Marijuana Mercenary. The reason I came up with the name One Step Over the Line, it was I'm 66 now. I came up with the idea for the book in my late 20s. As I was developing into a drug dealer and a smuggler and what I call drug runner, I had no idea. I thought, this would be a great book. And what my thinking was, God, my big mistake was taking one step over the line. And we all do that. I say in the book, we all have skeletons in our closet. None of us are perfect. And a lot of us have taken one step over the line, and some of us have taken it over a good line. As an example, Mark Zuckerberg quit Harvard to start Facebook. Worked out okay for him. Ken Behr decided to be a drug runner and spent 22 years, and it didn't work out so good. So I'll say this before we start the recording. Kids, crime doesn't pay. In the end, the only people that really succeed in it are the lawyers that get paid to get you out of your trouble and sometimes politicians. There are people that retire wealthy. I only know 2 out of 200 maybe, or 3,000. I don't know. But in the end of the book, I realized that my big crime was not taking 2 steps back. Yeah. After I was arrested, the first drug charge, the first arrest, the second arrest, which had me looking at 25 years.
Wow.
Minimum mandatory in a state prison.
Can you take us back to the beginning and tell us what really led you to to drug dealing?
Well, now you got to remember 1969, 1970, race riots, hippies in the streets, anti-Vietnam movement, free love, Woodstock, the age of Aquarius, as I call it, bell bottoms. I happened to move from our farm in Norman Rockwell, I call it, Wayne, New Jersey, which is upper New Jersey. It's the Garden State. We had a farm. I came from immigrant, hardworking family. I was taught to, my grandfather I tell in the book the story, my grandfather had a coffee can of bent nails and he had a little hammer. And my job was to go over there and straighten the nails. That was that mentality. I moved at 12 to New Orleans in 1969. Again, this is a complete different lifestyle for me, obviously. My father passed away shortly thereafter. My mother in 1970.
Your father died when you were how old?
13. I was 13.
13 years old. What
so it's it's a tough time.
Yeah.
And it was instantaneous. It wasn't something we knew was coming. There was no way to prepare for it. So it's tough. And a kid becomes of age. And remember back then, if you smoked a joint, sold a joint, owned a joint, possessed a joint, you could do a year in jail. I mean, I say in the book, if those are old enough to remember Jerry Rubin, the leader of the Yippie movement, he kind of said the first puff made you an enemy of society. So, but my mom decided to get us away from New Orleans and the drug culture and the seedy South and move us to sunny South Florida in 1973. So by the time I was 16, basically South Florida in 1973 was the epicenter of the drugs coming into America.
It was on TV back then. I remember Miami was like the drug center. They'd smuggle it in from wherever, like the Caribbean, South America.
Yeah, well, Caribbean and Colombia. Colombia is the closest South American country to Florida, 1,500 miles by plane. And so in the beginning, it was just marijuana. It was just I was a kid. People would would, come in with a small boatload of marijuana. They'd throw a couple 100 pounds on the deck of their sailboat. It was an innocuous thing. Nobody got hurt. Nobody carried a gun, and nobody went to jail for a long time. I had a friend of mine who got caught on a ground crew for unloading for an airplane scooter. They sent him to Eglin Air Force Base, which was, club fed. He did a couple years, and he was able to go to flight school there to learn how to fly. Wow. So it was a white collar crime. But at the same time, Nixon, he started the war on drugs, and I get into this in my book because he wanted to discredit those movements because he felt like it was not good for his political movement, for his policies. And so he started the DEA to discredit, unfortunately, Black America, the hippies, the riots in the street. Remember, in 1965, it was Bobby socks, poodle skirts, bouffant hairdos, and Bobby Darin. By 1969, it was Led Zeppelin, Woodstock, Free Love, and Burning Bras. There was no bouffant hairdos. So I grew up in that world.
Right, that was the atmosphere. In fact, your book starts with your face smashed down into the carpet of a motel room. Tell us about that.
Right. So what I do is I start the book with my final arrest. I get busted in Ohio with a small amount of marijuana. I kind of thought, what are they going to do? It's only like 100 pounds. I had been running thousands and thousands of pounds for years. The smallest load we usually did was about 1,000 pounds, and so a half a ton. And we've moved tons and tons of weed all over the country. And Ohio was my number one customer, my partner, basically. And my partner turned me in when he got busted. Well, they went to him and said, listen, we know that you've been doing this. He got caught. They said, we know the marijuana is stored on a common barn between you and your parents' house. So we're going to put you in jail. We're going to put your parents in jail. We're going to take all the properties. We're going to put your wife in jail. We're going to leave your 4 kids. So what did he do? He agreed to testify against me, and he set me up. And in the book, and I'm thinking I got busted for 100 pounds, but the state of Ohio had other plans. They knew I've been doing this for over 12 years, and they decided to use the RICO charge, racketeering influence corrupt organization charge, and that's what they used to use on the big mobsters, and they decided to do that to me, obviously to get me to cooperate. But the problem was I was trained from a young age. I was trained at 13 or 14. At that point, I was 33. I've been through this. I'd flown millions of dollars in Learjets to the Cayman Islands for the biggest smugglers in the world. I had already been busted once in Massachusetts for 1,400 pounds that I was moving, that we had smuggled in from Canada, of all places. By the time you're a kid growing up in South Florida, remember South Florida was like the San Francisco gold rush. It all happened here. People came from all over the country and all over the world to make their fortune and sometimes lose their lives many times, or go to jail for long periods of time. So I got sucked into the drug wars. And like you said, the book starts where my life of crime ends.
If you hadn't lost your father at 13, you had that direction that a kid needs. Do you think this would have happened? Do you think you would have gotten into drug trade?
I say in the book several times, if my father was still alive, this would not have been my story. Now, let me say this, and I'm serious. I believe in a higher power and everything happens for a reason. And I miss my father tremendously. Yeah. But maybe the trials and tribulations I went through were all to make me the man I am today. Yeah. Let's put it this way. How do I know there's a higher power? I'm not this good at my own. I can't be this lucky. So, but I'm blessed now to have a wonderful wife, 4 wonderful kids, and, a great place to have a pulpit to finally write this book that's been I wanted to write it in the when I was in my 20s. So for over almost 40 years, and I've kept notes and documented things knowing that this day should come. And it did. So I'm proud to say I've done it. I've accomplished something.
Now, I listened to the first maybe 4 chapters of the book, and the book is absolutely mesmerizing. I just can't put I couldn't put the thing down. And that was that was a pre-publication. Right. And I just can't wait to hear the rest of it.
It's a long story. I mean, it's a deep dive into the war on drugs. I worked for both sides. I did my own thing. I say I worked for pirates, both pirates, the pirates of the fun-loving, swashbuckling marijuana smugglers, and this very serious United States government and the DEA. And
so after you were done with your life of crime, you went to work for the government and helped bust drug dealers. Yeah.
Right. And what had happened was, it wasn't my intention. I had, this story's in the book, but I'll tell you a funny story. I got home from being 3 months in jail trying to get bond, and went home to I had gotten busted 2 weeks after getting married to my first wife, and my daughter was a year and a half old. So I literally went from my honeymoon to a jail cell. Imagine my poor wife. Every woman's dream is to get married, white picket fence. And here I am, she's going to, instead of having that, she has a convict husband that could be gone for 25 years. And right before I left to drive to Texas to pick up the load, she said to me, don't go. She said repeatedly, don't go. I'll get a job. You'll get a job. I'll eat white bread and mayonnaise sandwiches. Please don't go. So, but me, I said, I didn't know anything else. I didn't know how to make a tie until my first arrest, because I had to make a tie to go to court. Let's see, I would have been 32 years old at that time.
Now, how did your time in prison impact your outlook on life and crime?
Well, I mean, I didn't do a lot of time. I did 2 stints, once for a couple weeks in the oldest prison that was built in 1863, and a total hellhole. There's hellholes and then there's hell on earth. That was one of them. And then in Ohio, I did 3 months in jail in 24-hour lockdown, kind of waiting to get bond, to get out, to get home. As a drug dealer, I knew you have to get out. When a case like this, if you don't get bond and you don't get out, you're not going to be able to fight the case. So I get home and I'm doing a menial job. I'm fixing cars I sold everything. I'd already sold. I lost. Look, I had a wedding, cost me 40 or 50 grand. I lost $100,000 worth of product. I had to hire lawyers for about $80,000. I had to sell my Rolex, my jet skis, my boats. Everything had to go. And I was actually working in a repair shop, working on cars and painting a friend of mine's house. Anything to get money. And I got a phone call from a big yacht broker that was a good friend of mine that had gotten busted in one of these things where he takes cash for a boat. No, they had these reverse things the government does.
Right.
So he called me up, and I remember I was in my living room and he says, how would you like to work for the DEA? And I was stunned. And I said,
wow.
What? I was whispering. And he goes, come meet me for lunch if you're willing to hear.
This is before your criminal trial, right?
Right. Oh, this is right after I got out of court, jail. My trial would have been years later.
Right.
So I didn't know what to do. I had no plan. Which, by the way, not having a father, I would say that I don't believe in regrets in life, but I will tell you that my biggest regret, and I don't like regrets, is because of not having a father and guidance. I think my whole life I grew up very reactive, never proactive. I never had a plan. I was bouncing like a pinball from one idea or one wall to another, one drug deal, one smuggling trip, one almost getting busted, whatever. And I was in survival mode all the time. And a key thing to success is have a road, right? We know this, have a roadmap, start and complete, execute properly. By the way, when you're running drugs, you really got to have a roadmap. You have to execute and start and complete a task. And when you're working for the DEA, the same. But that was kind of my life, and I was just on a constant, what the hell do I do next? And
so how long did you have to go to prison?
Well, I didn't, because what happened was I did so much work for the DEA between the 3-month jail term. They gave me probation for
how long would it have been if you had
25-year minimum mandatory?
25-year minimum
and
mandatory.
That was what the RICO charged. After that, you can get probation. Now, they might give you good time, but one of my co-defendants in the case did all of 10 years. Another friend of mine got Kingpin status. He got life in prison. He did 27 years. And a good friend of mine just got out after 22 years.
So that could have been you.
That could have been me. And remember, I had a bad heart right after. I could have died in prison if I would have never gotten that. I've had 2 open heart surgeries. That never would have happened in jail. I would have just died there. But anyway, so going back to the story, the gentleman called me up and he says, well, would you like to work for the DEA? And I had no intention of cooperating with the police. I mean, maybe it's this, I didn't know what to do, right? And he sits me down, he goes, listen, if you'll work for the DEA, I'll get credit for it. He goes, they have we'll work together. And he goes, I told him you're a big smuggler and a big drug runner and you've been doing it forever and you have a wife and a newborn baby and you're willing to work. I said, so what? The DEA is kind of like Amway? Like you get credit for my sales? It's a multi-level marketing thing? And it turned out that, yeah. So I met my DEA handler. I talk about it in the book, and his name in the book is Jimmy Kane, Captain Bobby. And with his help and the help of the head of the Lorain County Drug Task Force in Ohio, Dennis Kavanaugh, I was able to get a second chance. And I never took that second chance lightly. Not today, not then, and not today, not ever. And funny story is I'm still very good friends with Agent Jim Kane and Dennis Kavanaugh. We talk.
Wow.
Jim Kane and I are. Matter of fact, his son just called me for some questions on his auto lease.
Wow.
So 30 years later, we're good friends. I mean, I respect them. They took care of me. They gave me a second chance.
Now, how did your relationship with your daughter affect what was going on?
Well, my daughter, she didn't know about all this, obviously. She was 1.5 when I got busted the second time, third time charged with a drug offense, second arrest. And now, and what happened was, sadly, when my kids were 8 and 12, their mother had a lot of surgeries, got involved in pain medication. So it's kind of the funny thing is what was the hardest thing in my life? Big pharma. My ex-wife got hooked on Oxycontins and codeine and, the pain medicines.
Wow.
And she left me to raise 2 children, 8 and 12. And I'm proud to say my daughter's a doctor. Where else?
Beautiful doctor, by the way.
Yes. And my son's is successful in his job. And here's the strange thing. I talk about it in the book. I went to Ohio a lot of times running drugs. I went up there a lot of times for court cases. But the best trip I ever made to Ohio was when I drove my daughter up there for her to start her externship for her doctorate at Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. So 30 years earlier, they gave me a chance. And now 30 years later, there's a doctor in Ohio that's treating the good people of Ohio because of that second chance.
Amazing.
That's amazing. And so
you lived in Florida, you run drugs up to Ohio. That's where you got arrested. And then your daughter now is a doctor up in Ohio.
Yeah. And the reason you do that is because let's say I bought 1,000 pounds in Florida. The market was so tight that I can make maybe $5 a pound brokering it, if that. Right. But shipping it up north, you can make a spread. I can make $50 a pound. So 1,000 pounds would make me $50,000 in 1980s dollars.
Wow.
That's a lot different than 2023 dollars. You and I know that's probably you make 40,000, like 80,000 today.
Yeah,
and I did that almost.
Don't get any ideas.
No. It's funny. Good advice. By the way,
I hear to build your life back.
I got home and I needed a job because the judge said, "Do you have a job?" I said, "Yes." And so the only person that would hire me was a car dealership. Obviously, I'm a car salesman. If you're not a convicted felon, you can't even apply. And I say that in jest, obviously. And I went into a luxury car dealership. Strangely, it was an Infiniti dealership. And my partner in Ohio had an Infiniti. And the gentleman who had introduced me to the DEA also had an Infiniti. So I knew the cars were good. And I went in and I walked in. I said, "I'm here for the job." And the guy looked up and the wind had blown my tie over my shoulder. I had no appointment. And he said, "We're not hiring." I said, "I'll work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. I got a 1.5-year-old daughter and a pregnant wife. Well, I need a job." They called me back a couple of days later and they gave me the job. And it was so important for me to prove to myself, to my family, that I could do it right. In the next 8 years, I was the #1 salesman in that store virtually every month. It wasn't only because it was hard. I worked harder than everybody else, and I am the world's greatest salesman. So between those two things.
Now, what was it like working for the DEA, and what role did that play in the transformation?
It was, luckily for me, my handler, who I've given the name Jim Kane in the book, was a very entrepreneurial guy himself. He saw the value in putting teams together. He wasn't just your run-of-the-mill government employee. He, as somebody once said, if he was in the private sector, he would have been the CEO of something somewhere. And he was kind to me. We developed a bond and we had a team. There was me, a Jamaican big smuggler that I call Sabo in the book. Dave Jackson, who's the yacht broker, very wealthy yacht broker, introduced me to Jim Kane. And between the three of us, we were an excellent team, and I really went to work hard for them. Here's the thing that people don't know. If you go to a foreign country and you're working for the American government and you don't declare that you're working for the American government, you're considered a spy.
Wow.
So what the American government does is take private citizens, send them kind of nonchalant. And so they don't have to declare them. And you'll see, like right now, there's that poor man, I can't remember his name, in Russia that's accused. And, that's what the government does. Because obviously I can't fly to Jamaica and tell the Jamaican government that I'm a DEA operative.
Exactly.
And then what's going to happen is that they'll sell that information. It might leak out. So same when I went to Canada. In Canada, we took down the largest cocaine smuggling ring in the history of Canada. They were doing a 10, if I remember correctly, 10-ton cocaine deal. That story's in the book, very intriguing. In Jamaica, we were after a smuggler there, but basically, I was expected to develop my own cases, which I did. Strange thing happened. While I was in jail in Ohio, and I didn't really know anybody, people were coming out of the woodwork going, listen, here's the name of a guy in Detroit who's on the run. And when I got back to Fort Lauderdale, my friends were going, listen, I can tell you about this. I mean, you never know how good your friends are, but when they start giving you leads to help you get out of trouble and then I brought another guy in we call Big Jeff, and we were a very effective team of operatives for the DEA. We did a lot of good cases.
Now, when you're writing the book, was there anything that was hard to relive?
Kind of all of it, I guess I'd say. I have to say that I've had PTSD, which I did not know that a guy, I thought you have to be in Afghanistan or World War II, but I ran into I was actually at a convention and there was a soldier there and he was talking to me about me having PTSD, and actually started to go off right in front of him. He says, you're going right now, aren't you? And I go, yeah. And it helped me get through it, writing it all out, talking about the jail. And, I had to get, I almost got beat up in jail. I had to outthink that. Usually brains get you a lot farther than brawn in these situations. There's a lot of prisoners in jail that are all dummies, but if they put their mind to good instead of evil, they could have been very successful. I mean, I mentioned in the book Donnie Steinberg, who's one of the biggest smugglers in U.S. history, who I worked for. And today he has 2 publicly traded companies after doing this time. Wow. So the cream rises to the top, so to speak. I think all of it taught me. One thing I learned about being in jail was you see the pain in people, the humanity. The guy killed his brother's wife, or the one prisoner stabbed his pregnant wife 7 times in the stomach. And then when he told me that once he got out, they'd be back together again, I said, Jose, she's a very understanding woman. But you really do learn about humanity, man's inhumanity to man also. But you can see the pain in people's eyes, no matter how big and tough the guy was or what crime he committed. At that moment, he just needed a little humor and someone to look back at him and say, we're all going to be okay. And
what's the most important message, since you're talking about messages, that you want the readers to take away from the book?
Well, I think they need to see that the war on drugs, created its own self. What if we never had a war on drugs? What if we had a common sense approach to drugs? We have alcohol, we have tobacco, and I don't know that there's an answer to that, right? I mean, cocaine addiction, heroin addiction, people laying in the street shooting needles, and, San Francisco is a perfect example of, what a nice city turned into, pardon my French, a shithole. So, but certainly cannabis. Do you know right now, last year, 250,000 Americans were charged with cannabis, wow. 92% with simple possession. That means 92% or almost 230,000 people are in this legal system, hiring a lawyer, dealing with the prosecutor, having to go to court, maybe losing their job, losing their rights to vote, losing their own self-worth for something so insane as marijuana, which is legal in
so many states it's legal now, and yet people in other states are getting arrested for it.
Yeah. And I read they had a setup today I read about because, I'm an expert on roadside stops. And, I knew as a young kid what the cops can do and what they can't do. Legal search, illegal search. We used to learn that stuff like kids go to high school to learn shop class. And because we grew up in it, and our mentors were older people. Don't say a word, never open your mouth, get a lawyer. We learned the basics like street kids. And remember, most of us, middle income kids from broken homes that, saw a chance to sell a little pot and just got begot. One day you're smoking pot. The next day you're on a runway with a plane full of 300 kilos of cocaine and machine guns and hand grenades. And what are you going to, just insanity.
And you've seen this.
I did it.
Yeah.
You didn't get to that chapter yet.
Wow. No, I didn't.
No.
Yeah, because the book just came out recently, so I hadn't had a chance to purchase it yet.
No, it's out today, basically.
So what do you think, what support systems do you think are crucial for helping individuals get out of a life of crime?
Well, I think the best thing is to stop them from getting into a life of crime.
Yep.
Listen to this. There's a road, my wife Franny's not part of any of this. She doesn't, she loves the book, not the content.
No.
And she's an educator. There's a direct link between pre-K, first grade, and prison. And let me show you. I had a learning disability. I had dyslexia, profound dyslexia to this day. I say in the book that you'll find some chapters are back-ass words, and I have a little Yoda speak because I'm dyslexic. It's really hard to write a 110,000 word book dyslexic, profoundly dyslexic. That's why I say it took me 6 years.
Wow.
And
tell me about a person who has been a significant influence or source of support in your journey.
Well, let me go back to, if you don't mind, to finish what I was saying. Yeah. So 50% of the prisoners have dyslexia. Right. 25 to 50% have ADHD. Wow. 85%, with all that added, come from a broken home and a failed first grade. If we have to find a way to, as somebody said, if you can get a driver's license for a car, maybe you should need a driver's license to have a child. Abusing children, not healing them, not having good education, not having good, a good safety net. Right. That's who ends up in jail. It's not that good kids from solid homes don't, and it's not that kids from broken homes will, but if you do the research, there's a direct correlation from not being accepted. One of the things about me was, I wasn't that accepted. My dad died at 13. My friends didn't know how to deal with it. I'd already failed first grade. I'd already, I had trouble learning, and I'm not giving that as an excuse because I'm a highly intelligent person. But I think the secret to stopping the prison systems from being overcrowded is to work very early on to make sure these people don't go there.
I'm sure that the teachers and maybe parents are attuned to the signs before they start to happen.
and have good backup for parents. Look, we're not going to fix all the broken. Right. My wife says not all the blueberries are the same. So we can't put them on a conveyor belt and expect all the blueberries to make it. We have to have different ways to teach different kids. And we have to understand. Remember, we used to have shop class and music class. Those are important things. But I apologize. What was the last question you asked before I went off on that? So
tell me a person who's been a significant influence or source of support in your life.
Well, for the last 8 years, it's been my wife, Fran. She is an amazing woman. She's strong, she's smart, works her, and she's loving. And I would tell you that, and my wife,
I've met her. She's a sweetheart. Yes.
An amazing woman. And,
absolutely.
And I think the other thing was motivation. I was a single dad raising 2 kids, and I did not want my kids to go back into my life or go into a life where they would abandon their kids. Right. As their mother done them. So I was determined. I say in the book that drug smuggling taught me how to make 2 different breakfasts for 2 different kids and get them to 2 different schools before 7:45 in the morning. Wow. I learned this multitasking. I was determined not to see my children follow my path.
So usually in divorce, the kids go with the mom. In this case, the kids went with the dad.
Went with me, because she was a drug addict. And she's okay now. Everybody has their pains. Maybe when she was younger, if her demons would have been properly dealt with, maybe we'd be a family today. But right. I'm blessed I hate to say this, but I'm blessed in the fact that I'm not, because I have Franny. And
beautiful.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And
my brother, Eric, I have to say, my 2 brothers have been phenomenal in supporting me. My younger brother, Eric, has been an amazing best friend. And my older brother's been an amazing guy. My younger brother and I are 2 cut out of the same bolt of cloth. My older brother's very rigid, an attorney, but he's been a great guiding light to me after my father died. He didn't accept me for my drug dealing, but he never wrote me off as his brother. Right. He was always there for me. And that support is what got me. The support of those 2 brothers and the love of my 2 children, and then finally finding Franny, I'm blessed. And a higher power for sure.
Absolutely. And what are your hopes for the future?
Well, I'm 66. I'm hoping to make it to 96. But I'd like to see the book work. Look, I defined myself by what? A drug dealer and I hate to use the street term, a snitch. And I became a top flight car salesman, which isn't exactly, going into, how people feel about car salesmen. And right. So I'd like to think that this book and the job I've done and the story I've told, and I believe it's very heartfelt. It's not a book. It's a book that goes into great detail about a lot of subjects in the drug wars and in running drugs and the American government involved in running drugs and my mistakes. And you get in depth. You read the book, you'll find out things about how the DEA works and how the drug running works, how you smuggle a load of drugs and, all of it. But hopefully you'll also...
One Step Over the Line. The book is One Step Over the Line, author Ken Behr. What's your final message?
Go to either Amazon, Audible, iTunes, or the website, onestepovertheline.com, and buy the book. You'll be enthralled with the story. But
always the salesman.
Always the salesman. But I have to say this, go with your heart. I mean, if your gut tells you something's wrong, trust me, something's wrong. That I'll tell you.
Yeah, you don't have to ask somebody if it's okay to drink a glass of milk. But if you have to ask somebody it's okay, that's probably your conscience telling you, maybe I better not do this.
Exactly right. Your gut, go with your honest heart feelings.
Yeah. Ken, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me on your show. And I watch it all the time and I love it. Very educational.